Thanks so much for joining us, and I'd like to start by just saying a thank you to Purina for the invitation to share with you today. And we're going to be looking at human allergy to cats and the implications that has for cat welfare and cat relinquishment. And although this is a subject that hasn't been studied specifically in detail, there is information out there that actually gives us an insight into the importance of cat allergy and the impact that has on our relationship with our cats. So what I want to do briefly is firstly to look at pet ownership and look at that human-animal bond, the quality of the human-animal bond and what that means. And then look at three things in particular: why people choose not to own cats or dogs, and there's data out there suggesting reasons why people don't own dogs or cats. Secondly, reasons why an owner may relinquish their cat to a rehoming organization. And thirdly, reasons why owners who have adopted a cat from a rehoming organization end up returning it to the rehoming organization. And all of those bits of information give us an insight into the importance of cat allergy and its impact on the human-animal bond. So firstly, pet ownership. We know that for the vast majority of owners, their pet cat or dog is considered a member of the family. This is true of probably more than 95% of owners. If you ask them, they will express the opinion that their dog or cat is simply a member of the family. And that speaks to the strength of this human-animal bond, the fact that we regard our pet cats or dogs simply as a member of the family. And that is all around the fact that these pets provide emotional support. Cats and dogs are perceived at least as providing unconditional love, a feeling of emotional safety and security, and a relationship that is a very secure relationship. So there was a study published, as you can see, in 2008, where people were asked, who do you know loves you, your partner or your pet? And more people considered that their pet was a relationship that they were secure in, that they knew their pet loved them more frequently than they knew that their partner loved them. So it does speak to the strength of the relationship that we have with our pets. That's also confirmed by many studies that have looked at reasons for owning a pet. These are three studies that I've highlighted here on the slide, one from Canada, two from the United States, but there are many other studies as well that have looked at reasons why people choose to own a cat or a dog. And pretty much every study that has ever looked at this, the major reasons are for companionship, for affection, and for emotional support. It is all about the relationship and the emotional bond that we have with the animal. There are other reasons for sure. The sense of responsibility that we have for caring for an animal. Sometimes people will choose a pet to help with children and give some support for children. But although there are many, many different reasons that contribute to pet ownership, it's the companionship and the affection and support we get from the animal that are the main reasons. That was also confirmed by a study published from Cats Protection in the UK a number of years ago now, where they asked owners why they owned a cat. As you can see from the results of that study, the single most common reason was for affection, that reason for companionship. Nearly 60% of owners said that that was the major reason. But you can see there are a variety of other reasons expressed as well. Things like the independent nature of a cat, the fact that cats are very clean animals, that they don't require much exercise, that they're relatively easy to look after. And some of these are reasons that almost certainly contribute to the rise in popularity of cats. because as human populations have become more urbanized over time, so it becomes more challenging to keep dogs, a pet that requires daily exercise perhaps, so it becomes easier to keep something like a cat. So this accounts for some of the changes that we've seen in pet populations over time. But irrespective of whether an owner chooses a dog or a cat, the strength of that emotional bond is very strong. This was a study that tried to look to see whether there was any real differences in the quality of the emotional bond between an owner and their cat or an owner and their dog. And there have been a number of studies that have looked at this, sometimes with conflicting results. But this study in particular wanted to look at the perceived comfort from owning an animal and avoid any species bias. So they were looking at the quality of the relationship, the companionship that was received, the love and emotional bond that was expressed between the owner and the pet, the feeling of need, of being loved, of being trusted, the pleasure that we get from the companionship of a pet cat or dog. And when they looked at various aspects of this relationship between the owner and the pet, they really found that there was no significant difference between dog owners and cat owners. The strength of the emotional bond was the same. The only real differences came when they started to look at species-specific questions. Things like, does your pet make you feel safer? Well, more dog owners said yes than cat owners. Does your pet make you exercise more? Again, more dog owners said yes. So there are some species differences, but in terms of the quality of the emotional bond, no real difference between dog owners and cat owners. And that emotional bond is extremely important because it has a number of benefits for the owner, both physical benefits and emotional or mental health benefits. And there are many, many reports that speak to this, that pet ownership results in greater social support, very much like having a parent or a sibling around. Pet ownership results in greater self-esteem, greater happiness, reduced levels of depression or loneliness or stress, and indeed has physical health benefits as well. Reduced number of visits to healthcare professionals, reduced level of prescribing from healthcare professionals, and some other specific medical benefits as well. So pet ownership appears to be very beneficial for us. This particular study looked at cat ownership and whether the degree of attachment to a cat has an effect on human health. So what they wanted to look at in this particular study was cardiovascular benefits, and these have been well described and well documented, that pet ownership, and in particular cat ownership, results in lower heart rate, lower blood pressure, lower risk of cardiovascular disease. So they wanted to look at this in more detail and see if the quality of the attachment between an owner and the cat actually contributed to this benefit. So they evaluated the quality of attachment by way of a questionnaire. They had 20 cat owners. They looked at heart rate and blood pressure at rest, and then before, during, and after a cat being present with the owner. What they found was that there was a significant reduction in the heart rate, in the systolic blood pressure, and also in the diastolic blood pressure whilst the cat was in the presence of the owner. So whilst the cat was present in the room with the owner, heart rate, blood pressure was significantly lower. So the cat was having a significant effect. What they actually showed was that the amount of effect on heart rate and blood pressure that was experienced by those owners was dependent on the level of attachment that the owner had with the cat. So the greater the level of attachment with the cat, the greater the effect on heart rate, the greater the effect on blood pressure. And not only that, they were able to show that that level of attachment was largely related to the duration of ownership. So particularly if a cat had been owned for a number of years, say 2 or 3 years, the level of attachment is likely to be much higher, and that higher level of attachment resulted in greater cardiovascular benefits. So again, just some objective data that shows that not only do we have strong emotional bonds with our pets, but that also results in objective benefits in terms of health of pet owners. If pet ownership has such benefits to health, you might ask the question, well, why do some people not own a pet? Why do some people choose not to own a cat or a dog? And as you would expect, there are a number of different reasons for this, but there are studies that have been published that have looked specifically at people that don't own pets and have asked them why they don't own a pet. This first study was from Canada. This was 245 households that didn't own a pet, either a dog or a cat. And they asked the reasons why these people chose not to own either a dog or a cat. And you can see that a whole variety of different reasons were given, as you would expect. Some people, it was simply because they traveled a lot. They didn't want to own a dog or a cat because they didn't have sufficient time, inappropriate housing, or they thought that their house was in an inappropriate location for owning a dog or a cat. But as you can see, the fifth most common reason given amongst these owners was allergy. Allergy to a dog or a cat, preventing them owning a dog or a cat. This was a study from the United States, again not differentiating between dog and cat ownership, but asking close to 700 owners or potential owners why they avoided having a dog or a cat. Why did you choose not to own a dog or a cat? Most common reasons that were stated amongst these people were the fact that they didn't have time to own a pet, they didn't have any interest in owning a dog or a cat, owning a cat or dog was going to be too expensive, or again, the fourth most common reason was because of allergy. They or somebody in their household had an allergy to dogs or cats, which prevented them considering dog or cat ownership. Didn't differentiate in that study between dog and cat ownership, but again, that was the fourth most common reason cited. In 2012, the American Humane Association published results of quite a large survey that they did of both pet owners and non-pet owners in North America. And they looked at different groups of potential owners. This particular part of the study, they looked at 500 people who had never owned dogs or cats. So they'd never owned dogs or cats. And they asked the reasons why they chose not to own a dog or cat. And they looked at dog and cat ownership separately. So the figures shown here are separately for dogs and cats. As you can see, for some people, they simply didn't like cats or didn't like dogs. Or their lifestyle may have been such that it didn't really allow for ownership. Again, things like traveling or perhaps the housing was inappropriate. The third most common reason given for not owning a cat was because they or somebody in their household was allergic to cats. That was the reason for 18% of these people that chose not to own a cat. Much higher, in fact, than people who chose not to own a dog. It was cited as a reason in 8% of people who chose not to own a dog. And other reasons as well, again, as you would expect. So you can see that for some people, the decision not to own a pet in the first place is based on the fact that there is allergy in someone in the house, having an allergy to a cat or a dog that meant that they chose not to own a dog or a cat. There's some data as well on people who have previously owned a dog or a cat and have chosen not to own a dog or cat now. So they've owned a dog or cat in the past, that dog or cat has died or been euthanized, and they've chosen not to replace that dog or cat. So again, that study in the United States from the American Humane Association looked at 500 former dog owners, 500 former cat owners who hadn't owned a dog or cat in the previous 12 months, and looked at the reasons why they chose not to currently own a dog or cat. Again, as you would expect, a variety of different reasons expressed, some of them because they were traveling more, some of them because of the expense of dog or cat ownership or the time involved in dog or cat ownership. But again, as you can see, 16% of former cat owners said that it was because of allergy in themselves or somebody in the household that made them choose not to own another cat, and that was true in 5% of former dog owners. So again, you can see that this is a bigger problem for cat owners than it is for dog owners, but for both of those groups, allergy of somebody in the household is an important reason for not currently owning a dog or cat. So cat allergy clearly does have some significant implications. It prevents some people choosing to own a dog or cat. Allergy to cats is actually extremely common. Globally, it's estimated that perhaps 10 to 15% of adults are allergic to cats. That may be an underestimate. There are certainly some studies that suggest the figure is higher than that, up to perhaps 20 or even 30%. And certainly of adults that have an inhaled allergy, then allergy to cats is a very, very common problem. It's thought to be a very common indoor inhaled allergic problem, so second only to house dust mites as a cause of inhaled allergy when it comes to indoor allergens. And we know that there are a number of different proteins that are produced by cats that may induce an allergic reaction, but FeLD1 is by far the most common allergen. Anything up to 96% of people who are allergic to cats show allergy to FeLD1, and it's estimated that up to 90% of the total allergic reactions seen in cat allergic individuals is due to this particular protein, FeLD1, which is secreted in saliva and is present on the hair coat as well. So another way that we can look at the impact of cat allergy on the human-animal bond is looking at studies that have assessed why people have relinquished a pet or a cat to a rehoming organization or a shelter. And there are a number of studies that have looked at this. This first study that I'll share with you, this was from Australia. This looked at nearly 50,000 owners that had relinquished cats to RSPCA shelters, one of 33 RSPCA shelters in Australia. These are the different reasons that were given, the main reasons for relinquishing the cat. Inappropriate housing, number of animals in the house, the fact that it was simply an unwanted pet, financial constraints, owner unable to cope, behavioral problems. But as you can see, amongst this group of nearly 50,000 owners, 3% of them said, again, that it was an allergy, that they had developed an allergy to the cat, or somebody in the household had developed an allergy to the cat, which meant they needed to rehome it. Second study from Australia, looking at online rehoming of cats, just looking at 7 cats. So this was a small study, but it was a detailed survey. This study found that allergy was reported in 14%, so it was the third most common reason, equal with new baby in the house, number of pets, and inadequate time as being a reason for rehoming the cat. And a third study from Australia, again a larger study, this time looking at 55 cats that had been relinquished to one of 3 shelters in Australia, and these were the different reasons cited for relinquishing the cat. Again, inappropriate housing being quite common, change in circumstances for the owner, the cost of cat ownership, having an unexpected litter of kittens and needing to rehome that litter of kittens, behavioural problems between cats or between cats and dogs in the household. But again, the 6th most common reason, and a reason quoted by 18% of the owners, was because someone in the house was allergic to the cat. There have been studies from United States as well. This particular study looked at pet relinquishment. It looked at both dog and cats being rehomed at shelters. Didn't distinguish between dogs and cats that were being rehomed, but looked at nearly 600 dogs and cats that were being rehomed. So problems with the pet were cited by 46%, as you can see. Again, inadequate housing, family health reasons, or 6%. The 4th most common reason being that somebody in the house was allergic to the dog or cat. They didn't separate out dog and cat ownership in this particular study. This study as well, they didn't separate out dog and cat ownership, but it looked at 54 dogs and cats that were rehomed. Behavioural reasons were common in this particular study, but again, allergy was cited by 18% of them as being the reason for relinquishing the cat to a rehoming organisation. Interestingly, with this study as well, again, they interviewed these owners and they tried to get quite a lot of information from the owners, but they found that pretty much without exception, these owners struggled with the decision to relinquish the cat or dog. And I think quite often we assume that this is an easy decision for owners. They don't want the dog or cat anymore, so they simply take it along to a rehoming organisation and they leave it there. But this and other studies have shown that for the vast majority of owners, because of the strong bond with their dog or cat, this is actually a very, very difficult decision. It's something that they struggle with, and it's not a decision that is made lightly. Couple of bits of data here that have been published, not looking at the prevalence or the frequency of citing allergy as a reason for relinquishing cats, but just looking at the common reasons for relinquishment of dogs and cats. In 2 studies, allergy of somebody in the household to a cat was the 2nd most common reason given for rehoming or relinquishing a cat to a rehoming centre. Interestingly, in one of those studies, they looked at the top 10 reasons for rehoming of dogs, relinquishing of dogs to a rehoming centre, and allergy didn't appear in the top 10 at all. So again, this is something that is more prevalent and more important amongst cat owners than amongst dog owners. And again, looking at studies that have specifically looked at cats, this was a large study published from United Kingdom. Over 6,000 cats that were relinquished to one of 11 rehoming centres in the UK. This was a study published in 2009. And when you looked at the individual reasons given for these cats, which were owned cats, these cats being relinquished to a rehoming centre, change in circumstances was the reason provided by 1/3 of the owners. Having a litter of kittens born that weren't wanted, that was a reason in 24%. Behavioural problems with the cat, cited in 12%. But as you can see, the 4th most common reason was allergy, and that was cited by 8% of these owners. So almost 1 in 10 of these owners saying that allergy, themselves being cat allergic, or again somebody in the house being allergic to cats, being the reason that they had to relinquish the cat. That was also looked at in that large study from the United States conducted by the American Humane Association. They looked at a group of cats and dogs that had been relinquished to shelters, and they went back to the owners to ask them why they had relinquished their cat or their dog to a rehoming shelter. Again, with cats, as you can see, being allergic to the cat was the second most common reason for relinquishment of the cat, and that was cited by 11% of the owners. Again, much higher proportion than the 2% of dog owners that cited it as a reason. Again, variety of other reasons given, but allergy clearly very important. And this particular study from the United States looked at 12 shelters and reasons for relinquishing nearly 1,500 cats over quite a long period of time. Again, a variety of different reasons given, behavioral reasons, number of cats in the house, but allergy was the reason provided by 19% of the owners. And this study also looked at dog relinquishment as well, and again it was much higher than the reason for dog relinquishment. Only 4% of owners said that a dog allergy was the cause of relinquishment of their dog. Finally, there's a study from Sweden that was published where they looked at 62 rehoming shelters in Sweden and asked those rehoming shelters what the most common reasons were for relinquishment of cats. The 2 most common reasons that were reported by the shelters were because the cat was abandoned, and secondly, because the owner was allergic to the cat. That may be a little bit misleading in terms of the percentages, because the data for individual cats was not available, so that's not a true prevalence of owners reporting that as a reason, but nevertheless it gives you an idea that again allergy to the cats was a common reason for relinquishment of cats to the rehoming organizations. So one final bit of evidence. There are some studies that have been published that have looked at cats or pets that have been rehomed from a rehoming organization, so they've gone to a new home, and then that new owner has had to take them back to the shelter, relinquish them back to the shelter for a variety of different reasons. So this is a study from the United States. Again, this is a combination of dogs and cats, so they didn't separate out dogs and cats. 60 dogs and 18 cats that were returned to a US shelter, and these were the reasons given. Problems that developed with other pets that were already in the household, problems with children, so the new dog or cat not getting on with children in the house, other behavioral problems, but the 4th most common reason given by 10% of these owners was somebody in the household was allergic to the dog or cat. This study again from the United States, now looking just specifically at cat owners, 42 cats that were returned or at least failed the rehoming process. In fact, in over a third of those, the rehoming failure was simply that the cat had died. When they followed up on these cats, they found that the cat had died. 17% of cases, the cat had run away, so was no longer with the new owner. And the 3rd most common reason why the cat was no longer with the new owner was, again, allergy, or in some instances, other illness that had developed amongst the owners. Again, just to give an idea, this is objective data that I've been able to collect. This was a survey, again, from United States, looking at a biomedical research cat colony. This was at University of Florida. This was non-invasive research that was being done with these cats, and they adopted out over 450 cats over a 6-year period. Once the research had been done, these cats were homed to new homes, and they wanted to look at the success of that homing program. So they contacted all of these owners, and eventually they got results back from 275. So 275 completed the survey. Of those 275 cats where they had information, 257 of them stayed in their homes. So they were successful homings. 93% of them successful, but 18 were relinquished back to the University of Florida for rehoming because it was unsuccessful for one reason or another. And these were the three most common reasons for unsuccessful rehoming. Firstly, that the new cat didn't get on with another cat in the household. Secondly, inappropriate elimination, so behavioral problems there, the top two. And the third reason, because somebody in the house was allergic to the cat. And finally, that study from the UK also looked at cats that had been returned to those shelters, unsuccessful rehomings. 3% of cats that were rehomed actually ended up being returned to the rehoming organisation because they couldn't stay in the new home. And again, the third most common reason for that was because somebody in the household was allergic. So what I wanted to do here was really share with you objective data that I've been able to find going back through the literature that speaks to how cat allergy, human allergy to cats, actually interferes with the human-animal bond. So we can see from looking at this data, in around 5 to 20% of cases, cat allergy, somebody in the household being allergic to cats, is the reason for relinquishing a cat to a cat shelter, rehoming organisation. And it's often in the top 3 to 5 causes of relinquishment of cats to a rehoming organisation. 16% of previous cat owners cited somebody in the house being allergic to cat as a reason not to get another cat. And somewhere between 6 and 18% of people, again, cited cat allergy as a reason not to consider getting a cat as a pet in the first place. So this speaks of objective reasons why there is a complete breakdown, if you like, in the relationship between an owner and a pet. The need to avoid cat ownership or giving up cat ownership despite strong emotional bond with the pet. When a person develops cat allergy, one of the most common recommendations from a healthcare professional is if there is a cat in the household, you should rehome that cat, remove the cat from the household to reduce the environmental burden of cat allergen. There have been studies that have asked healthcare professionals, human healthcare professionals, how many cat owners do you think actually follow up with that recommendation? How many do you think are likely to relinquish their cat? And human healthcare professionals have estimated that probably about a third of owners are likely to give up their cat as a result of cat allergy. In fact, when studies have specifically looked at this, the number of owners that are prepared to relinquish their cat appears to be much lower. So these are at least 2 studies that I could find where the owners were advised to give up their cat as a result of developing a cat allergy, and in long-term follow-up, in one study, less than a quarter of the owners gave up their cat, and in the other study, only 4% of the cat owners gave up their cat, despite the recommendation from the healthcare provider. And I think this is important as well, because if we think about cat allergic individuals that end up relinquishing their cat to a rehoming organisation, that is probably just the tip of the iceberg. There are many, many other owners where there is somebody in the household that is allergic to the cat, but it is not perhaps severe enough that they will consider rehoming their cat. They want to maintain the relationship they have with the cat. That relationship with the cat is extremely important to them, and they're prepared to suffer, to some degree, the symptoms of cat allergy to preserve the emotional bond that they have with the cat. But it may still interfere with the relationship they have with the cat. They may have to spend less time with the cat. They may have to restrict access to the cat to certain rooms in the house. They may have to undertake measures to try and reduce the amount of burden of cat allergen in the environment. Some owners will be even bathing the cat maybe 2 or 3 times a week to try and reduce the amount of allergen in the environment. And because of this, we need to find cat-friendly ways to try and reduce the amount of allergen in the environment. There are many people that suffer with cat allergy. There are many cat owners that suffer with cat allergy, and veterinarians being part of the discussion and being part of finding a solution, finding cat-friendly ways to help reduce the level of environmental burden of allergen, and so hopefully making life better for these cat owners, will be an important part of helping to enhance the human-animal bond. Thank you very much for listening.